Okay, Elaine Barber is our first speaker here. She is the Vice President of Education and Workforce in the Greater Houston Partnership's Public Policy Division. GHP is Houston's leading business organization and has been transformational in the way we've looked at how we can address workforce and technology needs in the city of Houston. Elaine has been the COO of Prevent Blindness America in Schaumburg, Illinois, before she joined the Greater Houston Partnership. Elaine received her bachelor's degree in occupational education from Southern Illinois University and was perhaps the main proponent of a document that the GHP put together very recently on upskilling the workforce in the energy space. So with that background, it's my pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon to everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the lunch. That's always great. My name is Elaine Barber, as was mentioned, and I'm with the Greater Houston Partnership. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about education and the energy workforce. For a moment, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the partnership. The Greater Houston Partnership is an organization whose mission is to ensure that the Houston region remains one of the best places to live, work, and build a business. We accomplish that by promoting economic development, foreign trade and investment, and advocating for efficient and effective government. And we do that in a number of ways through our aggressive work on public policy at the local level, in Austin, and in Washington. We represent a member organization, and we have approximately 2,000 businesses and institutions that come together with this express purpose of ensuring that there is prosperity in the region. And we cover an 11-county regional area. About 2 years ago, a new president and CEO came on board at the Greater Houston Partnership by the name of Bob Harvey. And he did what we like to call a listening tour. He went out to small, medium, and large companies in the region, speaking with their C-suite individuals, whether they be the president of the company or the COO of the company, to kind of hear from them what they consider to be the critical issues affecting the Houston region. Now, this was not primarily to talk about workforce issues. This was to just talk in general of where businesses saw their greatest needs. And he tells the story that 9 out of 10 companies that he went to said, you guys are doing it when it comes to economic development. You've got it really well when it comes to policy. We see, we hear, we recognize the things that are going on. Where you are totally missing the boat is in the area of workforce development. We are struggling. We cannot find the skilled talent, the talent work pool that we need to fill the jobs presently that we have, and then projections for expansion in the future. And as a result of that, Bob came back and we formed a task force, the Regional Workforce Development Task Force, that was chaired by Gina Luna, who is the chairperson of JP Morgan Chase, and Bruce Culpepper, who is a vice president with Shell Oil Company. We brought together 79 entities from around the region that form education. Business and industry was at least 51% of the representation. Education, K-12, as well as higher education, to include the community college and four-year institutions. And then an interesting group that we don't often work with, not for any reason other than, I guess, just one of those kinds of things. And that's those nonprofit organizations that perform what we call wraparound services. So United Ways, those entities that work with immigration, that work with drug and alcohol abuse, you name it, those entities were at the table with us as well. So we had about 80 individuals. From that came what we call Upskill Houston, and there is a brochure, there should be a brochure in front of you. Our Upskill Houston Action Plan is a blueprint for leaders in the business community, institutions, both on the education and social service side, to look at workforce needs and then build a program around that. A key characteristic of this program is connecting leaders from these various segments that I mentioned to address workforce challenges. So this is a workforce program by and for the benefit of business and industry in our region. The plan will be implemented under the direction of the partnership. This slide provides to you the basics of the hardest to fill jobs in our region. As you can see skilled trades, sales representatives, drivers, IT staff, accounting and finance staff, engineers, technicians, management executives, mechanics, and teachers form those areas that are hardest to fill in our 11-county region. We also want to look at what are the greatest workforce challenges. You may or may not be able to read this. But what we found was that talent shortages coming from the expansion of companies was the greatest. Graduating a sufficient supply of skilled workers came immediately following, and on and on. These are all why we have the greatest difficulties filling the workforce needs in our region. This slide presents to you the numbers of jobs that are in the Houston MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area, and this was back in 2012. And it will show to you that, demonstrate to you, that 1.4 million are in the middle skills jobs area. These are the jobs by their particular areas. This is a very busy chart, but let me just tell you what it is. We've got a very complicated and convoluted, I like to say, workforce system. And what this chart demonstrates or depicts is the various stages entities or individuals have to go through to be able to access services, whether it be in the pipeline, attempting to try and find individuals, starting with pre-K. If you look all the way over, you'll see pre-K through 12, followed by the secondary, post-secondary area, and then moving to employment. So as you can see, it's a pretty complicated way of determining how best to access programs and activities. This is also divided according to supply and demand. Important in that are those institutions that provide the occupational skills training needed to meet the supply, and the demand as demonstrated by employers who say, here's what we need today, here's what we need 2 years from now in terms of the jobs, and 5 years as we are building and expanding our businesses. So our particular focus area, the partnership decided to zero in on middle skills jobs. Those are jobs that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a 4-year degree. So generally, typically, these are jobs that certificates from community colleges falls into place. Individuals can get these stackable credentials in community college and then move on into specific areas within those areas. Upskill Houston, I mentioned, is the name of our program initiative, and it's all about success, demands, and skills. The objective of our program is to create an action plan to address the middle skills area. In other words, address those particular jobs in those areas where students and individuals are having difficulty finding the jobs, and employers are telling us they're having a hard time identifying those. The programs that we looked at, because we didn't intend to reinvent the wheel. We did not want to go and start any new programs because there are very good programs in place. We looked at the various programs that exist in workforce development, and there are some 60 programs, and that's not even counting all the vocational, technical programs, the proprietary schools that provide classroom training and occupational skills area. These are simply those specific programs that are provided in various areas. And we broke it out. 26 work on improving better employment outcomes. 17 are sector-specific programs. And when we say sector-specific, we mean an association like the Association of General Contractors may have a specific classroom training program. There are 13 apprenticeship programs. The Department of Labor provides apprenticeship programs where they will provide specific classroom stackable training to individuals and then place them at particular jobs. Industry education alignment, all of these really come under our umbrella now as we look at the various programs in the region that address these particular areas. Again, this depicts the fragmented landscape. We've got 9 community colleges, 73 school districts. We have tons of nonprofits, 1 workforce board, and dozens of industry and trade associations. That's the landscape of Houston in terms of workforce. So our program, again, attempted to address all of these particular areas as I mentioned before. The project will address 1 to 5 year time horizon and lay the groundwork for a sustained effort. We noticed when bringing together the 79 entities, as I mentioned before, that there were 4 major gap areas. Awareness. People just don't know. Students don't know. Adults are not aware of what training opportunities exist, are not aware in many instances of the various careers that can culminate from specific training. So the awareness piece was one gap that we saw. Basic skills and employability. What do we mean by that? What we're talking about here are many individuals lack the basic skills, soft skills it's often called, to be able to interview well, and then once they get the job, to keep the job. The employability side of it is helping individuals to be able to work through the various stages of difficulties that they may have and becoming employable. C, coordination. We find that these agencies, many of them, these organizations are doing a wonderful job of providing training, but many of them were not coordinating with each other. Many of the organizations were not connecting with community college. Many were not connecting with the social service side of things. And so that coordination piece was missing. And as well, business and industry was not often aware of all of the various programs that were in place in the region to address trying to identify individuals who were trained and skilled to be able to take the jobs. And last, data. What do we mean by data? So the Department of Labor puts out data analysis which says, here are the number of jobs that exist, here are the openings, but ladies and gentlemen, that information is generally 18 months old by the time we get it. It often does not, in most instances, it does not go with a career projection or an expansion. If Chevron is planning to do new expansion work and needs X number of individuals, none of that information is contained in the report. Generally, there's some analysis and some future projection, but it's not generally based upon any ability to have worked with those companies to get that information. And so the data often we found was lacking in terms of being able to make measured, sophisticated information on how best the future and the employment outlook would be. So based upon that, we formed 6 strategies. Strategy 1 is going to be to set up sector councils. So we've looked at the major industrial areas, which I'm going to mention to you in a moment, and then we're going to set up business-driven sector groups according to those areas to sit down at the table on a continuous basis and talk about the employment needs, the training needs, and the expansion in their particular areas. And it will be done by sector. Awareness campaign will be, how do we get that information out? How do we make sure that the individuals that need to know about these various opportunities are given that chance and that ability to be able to see? And so the awareness campaign will kick off very shortly in terms of helping get the word out to all of our interested audiences about the various training programs that exist. Basic skills and employability, I've mentioned, we're going to bring together those various agencies that provide that training and work in cooperation. Coordination will be, again, bringing all of these various entities together to address these particular issues. Strategy 5, we've brought on some new companies. Burning Glass is one of them that does data analysis on a regular basis. We've received a grant from JP Chase for data analysis. They are going to also be providing us on a continuous basis by surveying and interviewing companies in the region. Now, companies generally like to keep their information very close to the vest before it's ready to be announced to the general public, so that the information, in terms of expansion, so the information that we're going to get will be kept in the aggregate, so that companies don't have to be concerned that individuals will know of their expansion efforts before. But it's really to help us in terms of developing that training apparatus that's needed to meet their needs. And then strategy 6 is supply side synchronization. How do we get the education and training providers to establish a network that can work to meet the demands for the employers from the supply side? Sector 1, strategy 1 is sector councils, as I mentioned. The areas that we've identified that are in the greatest need for industrial growth and development are advanced manufacturing, commercial and industrial construction, healthcare, oil and gas, petrochemicals, ports and maritime, and others. If anyone is specifically interested in this work, we have a comprehensive report where we went through and measured all of these particular areas and the jobs within these particular industrial areas. And you can find it on our website, www.houston.org. Pull down Upskill Houston, and as I say, we've got a report that goes into detail to outline these particular areas. These sector councils are going to be charged with identifying various critical occupations within their sector area. They're going to increase relevance of curricula. If you now presently go to San Jac or to HCC or to any one of these other community colleges for a particular similar program, say process technology, for example, the curricula in some instances will have some variations and differences. Employers tell us very specifically what they need in terms of the relevance of that curriculum. We're going to work to ensure that all of the various training programs have that information that has come to us from the employer community. Define career pathways. So you start at this area. For example, in the energy environments, maybe you start on a rig as a roustabout, which is a very comprehensive baseline position, fundamental position. What do you need to do to build, to move up within the career path? And so those kinds of things will be explored. We're also going to provide work-based learning opportunities and internships for those individuals. Our program ultimately will have internship opportunities for individuals that want to move into those various areas. And then, of course, to raise public awareness. Awareness is key. As I mentioned to you, most people are not aware of what career opportunities exist in certain areas. So it'll be our responsibility to work in developing an aggressive campaign to change the awareness perception of middle skills. Many students say, no, I don't want to work in the middle skills area. That's all work that is shift and a number of areas, and I'm not interested. So it's really getting individuals to be aware of what that all means. Basic skills, as I mentioned to you, encourage the adaptation of common tools and curricula to address individuals and provide training that works specifically in this space. Coordination, as I mentioned, bringing all of those entities together for the dissemination of information throughout the system. Again, lots of great things going on out there, but a lack of a coordinated system in terms of really looking at how all of these fall into place. And then our data system. Working to develop those tools that can really look at demand side and supply side information. This initiative, as I've mentioned, started about a year ago. We're just now in the phases of developing the sector councils. We're going to start with our petrochemical council first, and then we're moving to the next phase, which will be industrial and commercial construction. We've got wonderful cooperation being demonstrated in the employer community. People are very excited about this initiative because what they're saying to us is, for the first time, you have everything under one umbrella. We're hoping to be able to really move to the next area once we finish middle skills within our region to move to the more talent-related, higher tech side, such as in the engineering professions and that sort of thing. Stay tuned, more to come, and it was my pleasure to provide you with an overview today.
Thank you so much, Elaine. We'll get to the next speaker right now. David Foster is the Special Assistant to the Secretary of Energy. He was in the private side until recently. He was also a strong voice for union labor, and so it's a great pleasure to have him here to come and talk to us a little bit about where the Department of Energy's perspective on employment opportunities in the energy space. Sure, I have my presentation.
Great, cool. Well, thank you very much, Ron, and I appreciate very much the opportunity to come down to Houston on a nice hot day like this. Gave me a chance to complain with my fellow speakers about what it's like to live in Minnesota, where we had the worst winter of my entire lifetime, 54 days below zero last winter. And if we have another one like that, I think I might move to Houston. Anyway, that's why I find myself at the Department of Energy in Washington, D.C. now, because it definitely beats the winter we just lived through. So I want to spend my time today talking to you a little bit about the Department of Energy and its mission, but most of my time talking about how we can best capitalize on the very significant opportunity that lies in front of us in the energy field in America today. It's not often that the stars of economic opportunity align for a country, and it's one of those moments where if we don't seize that opportunity, we'll look back and have to acknowledge that the fault lay not with the stars, but with ourselves. This opportunity is especially important for three pretty obvious reasons, I think. First, the economy has yet to stage the full recovery that many of our fellow Americans so desperately need. Unemployment is still too high, and chillingly, workforce participation is way too low. In fact, it's at only 62.9%, the lowest level since 1978. I was thinking about that statistic today, and that really goes back to an era before American women had made their great entrance into the workforce. You have to go back 36 years in order to find a time when so few people participated in the U.S. workforce. Consequently, millions of people in our country have given up looking for work and are simply not counted among the official unemployed. This is especially true in our disadvantaged communities where unemployment and increasingly even access to employment is intolerably high. So frankly, we need these jobs. Secondly, climate change has become a more and more disruptive fact in the economic life of the country. A year ago, our department released a study on the cost and frequency of extreme weather events. Since 1980, we found that the U.S. has sustained 144 weather disasters where damage in each of those events exceeded $1 billion. The total cost of these storms exceeds $1 trillion, Most important is to remember the accelerating frequency of these events, with 7 of the 10 costliest occurring just in the last decade. The truth is that we simply cannot afford to have an energy policy that doesn't put us on a long-term trajectory toward a low-carbon economy. Now, some would argue that such a trajectory is incompatible with an energy job strategy, but at the Department of Energy, we believe that an all-of-the-above energy strategy is perfectly consistent with the quickest and most effective job strategy to put America back to work and simultaneously reduce our carbon emissions. Third, global competitiveness will be key to our nation's economic success, and we can't achieve that success without being the leaders in all energy production sectors, technologies, distribution systems, and consumption patterns throughout the economy. We need to simultaneously lead in the deployment of carbon capture sequestration technology, unconventional natural gas extraction, enhanced oil recovery, low-carbon steel fabrication, electric vehicles, wind, solar technologies, the list goes on and on. We need to stabilize our nuclear power fleet and ensure its participation in zero-emissions electrical generation. In the 21st century, the low-cost energy producer in a highly efficient, low-carbon economy will dominate the next generation. To be blunt, an all-of-the-above energy strategy is the only way that all of us can win. And incidentally, it's the path that allows America to lead in all the technologies needed to solve our climate crisis. So let's examine for a moment the role of energy in our economy. We built a modern industrial economy at a time when our domestic supplies of energy were abundant and cheap. Over time, we lost that advantage and came to rely on others for their cheaper energy, and we increasingly outsourced the production of our energy-intensive products, whether steel or aluminum or paper. Rather than tackling the problem of making our energy consumption more efficient, we chased the goal of making our energy production cheaper in other parts of the world. America became an energy importer, our manufacturing declined, especially in energy-intensive and labor-intensive industries, and our trade deficit soared. Today, as I said, the stars have realigned. The technology advances in oil and gas extraction have turned the corner on America's reliance on others for our fossil fuels. A combination of regulatory changes, technology improvements, and financial incentives have accelerated our renewable energy production to new levels. The drive for fuel efficiency in the vehicle transportation sector has restored our country's leadership in automotive production, and we're on the cusp of having an unprecedented opportunity to dominate the heavy-duty truck industry as well. At the core of this opportunity is the fact that America has once again become one of the world's largest producers of oil and gas. And I know people may think that talking about climate change and talking about that fact are in contradiction to each other, but it's the core of the point that I want to make. As others have noted, for the first time in almost a generation, a majority of our domestic oil consumption is domestically produced. The question remains, what do we do with the opportunity that's been handed to us? Do we simply repeat the past when our domestic supplies dwindle and again chase cheaper sources from overseas? Or do we make the strategic decision to use our temporary advantage in energy abundance to retool our economy and focus on a well-financed, well-crafted transition to a low-carbon economy? If we do the latter, 40 years from now, America will be the leader in every low-carbon efficient technology across the global economy. The opportunity in front of us struck home to me a year and a half ago when I was discussing manufacturing opportunities in the United States with an executive of Alcoa, one of the world's largest aluminum companies. I know that industry well and have served on the board of directors of one of Alcoa's chief competitors. Alcoa operates 9 alumina fineries around the world. Those are the complexes that convert bauxite ore into alumina, the raw material from which we make aluminum. It's an energy-intensive chemical process. Here in Texas, in Point Comfort, Alcoa has operated an aluminum smelter since 1948. 5 years ago, it was at the high end of the cost curve for Alcoa smelters worldwide and at risk, frankly. But in a few short years, the unlocking of America's natural gas supply turned the Alcoa cost curve on its head, and Point Comfort went from the high end to the low end. America, the last place to invest in energy-intensive production processes, suddenly became the first place. Low-cost, reliable sources of energy suddenly have become America's global competitive advantage. Now, instead of squandering this advantage, let's use it to make America the leader in energy technologies across the board and across the world. At DOE, that's fully in line with our mission, which you can see on the slide. The mission of the Energy Department is to assure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. And that, frankly, is why we also need an energy-based job strategy. At DOE, we're focusing on accelerating the country's capacity to develop such strategies at the federal, state, and local levels. Here are the three areas on which we are focused, and some of them are quite familiar with the presentation we just heard. First, we need better data. Our current systems do not adequately measure the connection between how we produce and consume energy and the job creation and job preservation that goes along with that. Some sectors we can count very well. For instance, we know that the utility sector employs 553,000 people. We know that the oil and gas extraction industry employs 201,000. But a recent Bureau of Labor Statistics survey reported only 400 jobs in the solar industry in the U.S. at the same time that an employer survey conducted by the Solar Foundation identified over 120,000 jobs in that industry nationwide. Our data on the number of jobs in the energy efficiency industry is very poor. Our systems can't differentiate, for instance, between machinists manufacturing bearings for wind turbines versus bearings for mining equipment. Thus, our employment data is disconnected in many respects from the revolution in energy we're experiencing and doesn't accurately describe the impact it is having on jobs across America. Our energy revolution is sparking demand for welders across multiple sectors, our new transmission lines, a demand for linemen, our wind manufacturing, a demand for machinists in Iowa, our drive for building energy efficiency, a demand for operators in maintenance engineering, and on and on. But our current data doesn't allow us to capture the way in which our production, distribution, and consumption of energy has permeated the rest of our economy. So at DOE, we intend to change that so that we can quantify the jobs and identify the jobs in which energy plays a significant role. And with that data, policymakers in the private sector can better plan how to capitalize on America's current energy advantage. The second piece of our energy job strategy is to connect the innovation technology of our DOE labs and university partnerships and our energy and manufacturing finance tools with the economic development programs of states and municipalities. DOE operates 17 important technology laboratories across the country. From Los Alamos to Oak Ridge in Tennessee to the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado to the Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago, much of our country's most important applied research is taking place in energy and manufacturing in those labs. In addition, DOE has recently opened 2 of our planned 10 centers for the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation in partnership with local universities. These first 2 were on additive manufacturing and 3D printing, the second on power electronics down at North Carolina State University. Innovation is the driver of technology, which in turn creates the workforce and the skills requirements for the future. But far too often, our technology has leapt from our country's innovators to commercialization in other countries. Take the example of wind and solar technologies, which were developed in the US but enjoyed their commercial successes first in Europe and Japan. As a result, today Germany, a country with 1/5 the size of the US population, employs double the number of people in its solar industry. and the sun hardly ever shines in Germany for those who've been there. Now, the department also operates something we call our Loan Program Office with over $40 billion of loan guarantee and grant authorization to help commercialize everything from improved natural gas extraction technology to carbon capture sequestration technology to advanced vehicle manufacturing. The Loan Program Office is actually the largest economic development bank in the Western world. Currently, we are financing the Vogtle nuclear power plant in Georgia, the first nuclear power plant to be built in decades in this country. Also the first commercial installation of a post-combustion carbon capture sequestration plant at the NRG coal-fired power plant right here in the Houston area. The groundbreaking just took place on Friday. This is of enormous importance for those in the coal industry who are concerned about the continued use of coal. For the first time in an existing power plant, 90% of the CO2 emissions will be captured from the burning of coal in that NRG power plant and used for enhanced oil recovery in an oil field 80 miles from here. It's opening up a whole new opportunity for those who sometimes are very threatened by the idea of low-carbon technology. Among our other important projects at DOE was the launching of Tesla Motors, who repaid their initial loan some 10 years in advance. What's important is that each of these projects has taken American technology and put it into communities where they're creating value and creating jobs. And each of these projects created the energy jobs of the 21st century, whether in specialized nuclear welding, in CCS technology, or in vehicle manufacturing. So across DOE, our goal is to bring to the states the technology and financing tools they need to implement their own energy jobs strategy, such as I'm hearing from the Greater Houston Partnership. Our loan program is open for business, and our labs are ready for partnerships. All these activities lead to the third prong of our energy job strategy, developing the energy workforce of the future. At DOE, our expertise lies in three distinct areas. First, as the developer of new technology, we have expertise in identifying those new job skills and building the curricula necessary to teach those skills. Second, as new skills proliferate throughout the workforce, certifications for standardization need to be developed. And finally, the opportunities for career pathways that we've been discussing already in these new sectors need to be identified so people see the opportunity that they have in front of them. Over the last year, our internal Department of Energy task force on workforce development and job skills has been focused on each of these areas. In the solar industry, we've collaborated with the Solar Energy Industry Association to create a solar installer certification and curriculum that's now taught all over the country. In building efficiency, we're working with the National Institute for Building Sciences to create 5 key certifications in building maintenance and operations. In Pennsylvania, we're working with a group called ShaleNet and the local Westmoreland Community College to create an unconventional gas extraction 3D simulator for training workers in the new shale gas industry. And in Tennessee, at the Oak Ridge Associated Universities, in partnership with Pellissippi State, we designed and recently completed the first additive manufacturing internship class in 3D printing. This class was so successful that virtually all of the first 25 graduates received job offers within days of their graduation. It was especially gratifying that 21 of these 25 graduates were veterans. That happens to be a picture of the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Energy driving a vehicle that was printed, not manufactured. It was printed with 3D printers down at the Oak Ridge lab. All of these efforts, and the many others we're involved in, instruct us in how the revolution in energy is taking place in America and is driving us toward an opportunity. But as with all opportunities, it's one that can be squandered or it can be husbanded, tended to, and fully realized. Our goal at DOE is to provide the data, the deployment toolkit, and the workforce development underpinnings that the country needs to accelerate job creation from our current energy advantage. Let's be the energy leader in the 40-year transition to a low-carbon economy. Let's do it with American technology and with American workers. Let's create demand for many of the skills our workforce already has, but let's also create the learning opportunity for the skills we need. We're ready to work, and we would invite the University of Houston to step up and work with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, David. Our last speaker here is Jonathan Moore. He is from Deloitte Consulting Company, and he's been at Deloitte for over 14 years. And before that, he was in Venezuela with an oil company. He has a degree from UT's McCombs School of Business. We won't hold that against you. Jonathan is part of the Deloitte's leading human capital practice focusing on global technology adoption for the oil and gas industry. Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you here.
All right. Good afternoon. I have to follow all of that. So, I'm pleased to be here today. I actually also lecture at the University of Texas, both undergraduate and graduate schools. Not anything as interesting as what I'm going to talk to you about today, but I've been working in the energy space for collectively about 10 plus years. You can kind of read my bio up there. I've done a lot of different things. But a lot of stuff that we've heard today, I helped develop simulations for companies in their nuclear facilities. I've helped work on things for people out on the rigs. And now currently I work with a lot of the companies here in Houston for a lot of these workforce challenges that we're experiencing today and will only accelerate in the future. And so the one thing I think that's important to hear throughout this presentation that I'm going to give you now is, and we've heard it in the other two speakers as well, is the importance of data. And you getting the right data to make the right decision is really critical to everything we do, and that tends to be one of the hardest challenges that we have to face. So a little bit about Deloitte Consulting. We're a big company. We're global. I've worked pretty much all over the world with different companies. The key thing is we have three big, in consulting we have three big areas. We have our strategy and operations group that helps, a lot of, if you guys go to business school here, we hire some folks out of business school for that. We have our technology group, which helps stand up a lot of the technologies that help enable these companies to run their business. And then I'm in the human capital group, and we deal with the people side of the business. So the workforce capabilities, the change management, critical workforce skills that are going to be needed in the economy in the future. That's kind of my area of focus. And one of our big things that we do at Deloitte as well is we have our Center for Energy Solutions here in Houston. And we do a lot of research on it. And so U of H contacted us for one of the research articles we did this last year around workforce analytics. And this is actually based on a real client example. And so I'm going to show you some of the research that led to it, but then hopefully in the Q&A we can talk about the real world example. So the question that was posed, is there a need for these skills? And the answer absolutely is yes, right? We've heard it from both of our other speakers here. At Deloitte, we see this continuing to be a key issue. We call it the war for talent. There's four big areas. We have our technological innovation and globalization. All of these big companies generally have a global workforce. One of the key things I'm working on right now is expats and global mobility, how to deal with that. You've got the next problem around high levels of natural attrition, both from a retirement point of view, but also all the way along the age chain. Number three is we have not enough people graduating with these degrees. So, if we want to have Americans go do these jobs, we don't really have enough of them, and we won't have enough of them. So companies will fill that with global talent. And even the more, what I see too is the skilled jobs and skilled employees here in the United States, they get exported around the world. And the cost of that, you can imagine, is pretty high. And then finally, one of probably the good sign is there's interest in the younger group, in the Gen Y millennials. So again, probably why some of you guys are here today. But that's good news. Probably the bad news is we just don't have enough of you. So again, all the things we can do to help build awareness, get people with the right skills, the right training, will help address this need. So let's start with technology. So the first thing, as we just heard in the DOE speech, there's been a big boom in technology in energy space. This is just going to increase, and not only for the standard, but also in the future innovation. I deal with a lot of companies right now that are trying to do a lot of deep water drilling, as well as I have one company here in town that's working to export the natural gas. So one of the few ones that have been granted those licenses. Also, just the resource intensity of some of these drilling, the water needs, the sand needs, and now the talent needs out there in these harsh environments. And so, how to deal with the cost and the training of these manpower needs? These companies have traditionally turned to either expats or a high contractor need. And again, that drives a lot of the cost and inefficiency. And as we'll see here in a second, we just don't have enough people graduating with these skill sets. So the next graph here is around a correlation between the S&P 500 and then also for oil price, and then also for the retirement gap. So again, as I'm sure your professors have told you, correlation doesn't imply causation. But we found this interesting, that you look at the graph, oil prices, they're going back up. We have a big baby boomer generation that's getting ready to retire. As Dr. Rahman said at the opening, that crisis is here, and we only see that accelerating. And then if you look at the supply and demand curve for people graduating, the master's degrees and PhD degrees have pretty much held flat. And the good news again is the bachelor's degrees are starting to go up, but the gap is around 60,000 people by 2018. And again, we just are not graduating enough people with the skills needed. Another interesting graph here around interest. So, my age, the Gen X, we're the small gap. We're also not as interested in these jobs. So the opportunity for the millennials coming behind us is also increased. But getting them, to the first presentation, getting them aware of what's out there, the opportunities, getting them skilled in the right ways, and matching them up is something that we definitely need to address. And again, going back to the retirement, we're going to have a big retirement drop-off here in the next 5 years. And so how are we going to fill that in the best way? So in good consulting terms, we've identified a couple of things that we think are interesting. And now we need to figure out a way to go fix them. And so, with this gap in the middle, these age interest things, this drive for the skilled nature and the globalization of the work, how are we going to go out and fill those positions in the most effective and efficient way? So, this is kind of how we want to look at it. And if you think about it, even from a typical business school problem, and even going back to some of the supply chain things, we deal with preventive maintenance on rigs today. We should know how many hours the rig has been working and how many failures they've had for certain parts. And we can start to get into predictive analytics around when we need to maintain the different pieces of equipment on that rig. Well, let's apply that same model to our people, right? And how do we start to understand what are those factors that drive attrition and drive voluntary turnover? And so what we want to get to is, again, data being the foundation of this, but we want to move up this curve as fast as we can with the companies that we work with and help them get to that point where they can start using some of their the data that they have to make some predictive guesses about where their workforce needs will actually be, both at the group and individual level, and have retention and recruitment strategies that address those needs, hopefully in partnership with people like you just heard. So the way we think about it is around these three things: understanding really what the stakeholder challenges and needs are. So these are the companies that I work with, on a daily basis. What are their actual needs? Understanding what their data and the systems that they have today are. And as you'll see, and as you've heard, data is really at the core of this problem. And the better we can get data quality, the better that we can get things integrated and interrelated, the better we can make choices. But that will continue to be a focus area. And so a lot of companies are on that base level, on that bottom quadrant. We need to get them to move up that quadrant. And so, if you just think about some of the common barriers to this, it's really around data quality. They don't have the right data in their systems today. They're not tracking it consistently. Their data is in different systems, especially if they've grown over many years and acquired other companies. They might have multiple data sources. Governance and decision making isn't always aligned. So, who actually owns that data? Who owns those personnel? Who owns those decisions? And getting alignment around the management teams. And then sometimes management teams think that they know their people, and so you have a change management concern as well around getting them to really recognize the need for them to address this. And then finally, from an internal capability standpoint, let's say we put in all these new systems, we put in all this new data. Well, people need to have new skills and capabilities to be able to use that data versus just enter data. So a lot of the work that I do now is helping to understand what that job skill path is, what those capabilities that people need are, and designing the organizations for the future around those needs. And in some cases, either upskilling folks or trying to fill that talent gap from a globalized nature. So, really, this is really just what I was just saying around how you can break some of those down. So I'm going to skip on to some of the more interesting data sources and show you an example of this. So when we talk about data, it's not just the master data around me as an employee, right? It's not just Jonathan Moore, lives in Austin, Texas, et cetera, et cetera. It's also my performance evaluations. It's who I've worked for in the past. It's who works for me. It's any interview data that they can get, exit data. It's stuff around the organizations that I've worked for and worked in, and some macro analysis around their performance and their evaluation. It's training records that I've done. It's classes that I've completed. It's even down to, in some cases, my internet usage and how I use the systems, depending on how sophisticated some of these systems can be to monitor what I actually do, especially in some of these preventive maintenance situations. And then there's a lot of macroeconomic data as well that we can pile into and start using some different data points to create some analysis there. And so one of the ways that we did this on this particular client is there's a tool out there that's called Tableau. There's a lot of different ones, but we use Tableau. And we created a dashboard. And we went through and we created what the critical workforce segments were going to be for that company. So as Elaine mentioned, there was she had the top 10. We would do that at a company basis and really understand what were the top 10 for that specific company. And then we go look at the factors that were leading to the attrition historically for those groups, and we then went and do some activity analysis to understand what they were actually doing and what they wanted to do in the future. And so building all this into a dashboard, you can now create this for the management of the company to really start to get a view of the group, or even down to the individual level, what their predictive analysis shows if they are at risk of leaving, and what those critical factors are that would lead to them staying. And as you can imagine, the more we can keep our trained and skilled employees, the cheaper it is for us overall, because I don't have to go out and recruit and retain. So there's a very clear business case, and most of the work that I do is all about building that business case to the company around how do we make this more efficient and cost effective for you as a group. And so this was a way for us to do that and show, the true cost of recruiting and retention for that company. So the other fact, that if you go out to Deloitte.com, you go under consulting. One of the big things we just published last month was around the global human capital trends that we're seeing. And this is basically based on for our Center for Energy Solutions view of it. But human capital globally goes out and surveys a bunch of our clients every year, and then we try to go back and come up with the top trends. So I've included that report as well. But I wanted to do the E&R cut for this discussion. And if you go out there to the website, you can play around with it. It's a cool little app. But again, hopefully you've heard some of these themes from the other two presenters today around what the top areas are. So reskilling the HR function, retention and engagement, talent acquisition and access. All of these are very, very, as you can see, these are the top ones that we hear globally from all of our clients. The next one is probably the more interesting one, which is for E&R. How ready are they to actually, capitalize on these things? And so you can see just a shift to the left. So there's a gap here across the board for all of these areas, which for consulting means there's a lot of opportunity there. And so the last bit is just to show you in another quick little nice visual, the top 10 here and where the gap. All of our clients see it. The clients I deal with on a daily basis, that's what I'm working with them to help define and answer those questions. There is a way to do it. You have to identify the right data sets. You have to identify the key skills and capabilities and critical workforce segments for those companies. But we're always trying to find that data. We're always trying to get the skilled and talented people into those positions. And frequently, we're trying to help fill this on a global basis and help manage this from a scarcity point of view. Okay.
Thank you so much. So we've got a few minutes now. The floor is open for questions. Mani in the back will walk around with a microphone. So if you've got a question, put up your hand. She'll be happy to bring the microphone to you. So see somebody there. So identify yourself. If you're a student, we'll give you a flash drive as a gift.
Good afternoon. My question is to Dr. David Foster. As you said, regarding the certification programs, you have the students get aware of the job markets in different areas. I would like to ask you if you know any certification programs which are part of Department of Energy for utility market, in the side of utility market.
Yes, developing certification programs is part of what we do with the external partnerships I was talking about. So take, for example, the National Institute of Business Sciences, which is a public-private partnership that's been operating since the mid-1970s. Our work with them is to develop 5 key certification standards for 5 key building maintenance operations. And I think their hope and others' hope is that by providing a common certification and a common curricula for earning that certification, then the ability to train and employ people in those occupations takes a big step forward. We did something similar with solar installation as solar installing took off in both residential and commercial buildings around the country. And there was a sense that there was a real need by employers to know what they were getting. So we created a certification program with the industry that also had a common curricula underneath it. And so approaching workforce development like that in these areas of new energy jobs is very important. I also mentioned this 3D simulator that's being developed by our lab in Pennsylvania, along with a number of gas extraction companies. And that, if it goes forward as planned, will have applicability up in North Dakota, down in Texas, as well as in the Marcellus shale fields in Pennsylvania. And there it's to create a much higher level of workforce training so that you get all the benefits of a more highly trained, more readily employable workforce and higher standards of performance for the employers as well. And it's using a very cool kind of technology where it's being done with a 3D simulator as opposed to actually having to go out in the field and do hands-on work and training.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Jonathan. All I'm hearing these days is that a bachelor's degree isn't good enough anymore in the upcoming future. And you're saying that we're lacking something like a great gap of bachelor's degrees. Can you tell me what fields they're in, or for your data?
Sure, yeah. So from that data specifically, it's for petroleum engineering.
Okay.
So from that data, but they're kind of going from Elaine's data too. There's a skill gap and a job gap across the whole spectrum. So, if we were looking at just graduate data for both bachelor's, master's, and PhD, and comparing that, that's really the only objective one we look at. But just working from the clients I work with, especially out of the rigs and things of that nature, and out also as a shale play, those jobs are very demanding. They're in demand right now. They pay very, very well. They do not require a 4-year degree in a lot of cases, but they do require the skills and capabilities and experience to plug somebody into that situation. So if you might not have that exact skill set, you can't get into this very lucrative, high demand job. And consequently, once you can't get into that bottom level, you can't then move up. So it's really trying to find the skilled labor at all those different places in order to help fill this gap.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Maya O'Meara, and I'm a student at the University of Houston. From what I've heard from all three of you guys is that there is a problem with data management and data quality. So is there a need for people to be able to do these analyses? Is there a need for that, for example, or is there a need for industrial organizational psychologists to perform these duties?
Yes, definitely. Not so much the psychologist aspect of it, but just the skill set to be able to analyze the data. So, for instance, a company that moves from, let's say an HR function. As HR needs to add more value back into the business, they're starting to change their model from a transactional nature to more of a supportive nature. And so, to do that, rather than have someone fill out a form for you, you need someone that can come and sit with your crew chief and help you identify from a predictive nature
the challenge.
Way to the back.
Good afternoon to the panel. My name is Janice Richard. I'm a MBA student graduating from the University of Houston in December. Yay. Dr. Foster, I have a question. First of all, I want to thank you and the Department of Energy for the wonderful work that you do. And I personally find your work very valuable and very grateful. Thank you. And your presentation today also. And in conjunction with that, I was wondering, I want my future plans to support the Russian oil and gas market, including staffing from our market. Is there a support group within the Department of Energy that I can look to for some data and some assistance on the Russian oil and gas market from this point of view?
I think there are probably several good sources of information on oil and gas markets in Russia and Europe. If I was understanding your question right, probably the best one is through the International Energy Agency, which is runs out of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development based in Europe. But they provide, I think, the best global data on what's going on with global energy trends. And here in the United States, the Energy Information Agency, which you can go online and deal with them, provides good data for here in the United States and has some global data as well, I believe.
Question.
I'm Jeremy Gray, student at the University of Houston Law Center, and my question is directed primarily to Dr. Foster. I was wondering to what extent is, compliance a driver of jobs growth in the energy industry? Compliance in particular, the new technology requirements which have been enacted in order to, address climate change.
First, I'm going to have to beg off and be called Dr. Foster. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lay scholar. Let's put it that way. I think that's a great question, and it's a question that not just here in the United States people are grappling with. They're grappling with it all over the world to try to understand how regulatory systems affect economic growth. One of the things that I think, from my perspective, is clear that in an economy such as our own, where there is not full employment and there is not full economic growth, that regulations have a different effect on the economy than they do when the economy is humming along at relatively full capacity. And so one of the things that happens when you introduce new regulations is that you frequently do create both demand and innovation. And that's one of the things that I think was demonstrated fairly interestingly with the new fuel economy rules that were put in place a couple of years ago, and the degree to which that helped drive innovation in the automotive sector, created a significant amount of investment. For instance, in the materials division, as the automotive industry decided that one of the most cost-effective ways to achieve fuel economy was to lightweight vehicles. And as a result of that, we've had billions of dollars of investment in the aluminum sheet and aluminum extruding businesses as automotive makers have moved into making things like the all-aluminum Ford F-150 pickup. Davenport, Iowa, $500 million in expansion on making aluminum sheet for automotive bodies. So you can see that there's a direct correlation between thoughtful, well-planned, well-timed regulatory activity and creating levels of economic investment, especially when the economy is not functioning at full force. So I think that's one of the things that we're all looking at very carefully around the world as to how kinds of investments responding to regulatory activity that's designed to address climate change, how they work in reality. I remain convinced that if they're done well and done smart, they can be very beneficial to economic growth. If they're done poorly and done haphazardly, we can make some real mistakes. But there are some good examples out there.
Thank you. I guess as a follow-up, my question specifically addressed, we were referring to the carbon capture and sequestration technology, and I was wondering if you see that spurring any growth in those industries. Is that going to be real, or is that, what do you expect?
Yeah, well, I think from my perspective, if you look at climate change as a global problem, it's not going to get solved here in the United States. And you look at the growth of consumption of coal in generating electricity around the world, we're not going to solve climate change without having effective, efficient, cost-effective deployment of carbon capture sequestration technology. One of the exciting things that I think is going on at the Department of Energy is this effort through our fossil energy program to start deploying CCS technology in post-combustion situations. So this Petronova project with NRG, 240 megawatts of coal-fired electric generation, and 90% of the CO2 coming out of that is going to be captured. There's indications that the economics of this are going to work so well that NRG is looking at phases down the road of expanding this. We're also helping ADM, a biofuels company, among other things, in Illinois, to install the first commercial industrial application of CCS technology. And that project will break ground maybe in December of this year. So there are a lot of different examples of how this technology can work. In our labs, we're already working on the second generation of this technology that as it gets perfected, we expect both the carbon removal of the technology will grow and the costs will basically drop in half. But we can't do that if we don't go forward and start the deployment of it. And so that's one of the things that the DOE loan program is charged with doing. And it, really in a lot of ways, it's the same kind of philosophy of how do you use technology to achieve a broader social goal, which is what the labs at DOE were originally charged with back under the Manhattan Project in the late 30s and 1940s, but now we're pointed in a direction of helping to solve our energy and climate crisis.
Front here.
Good afternoon. I'm the Tourism Engineering graduate student here at Deloitte, and my question is for Mr. Elaine. Identified two primary reasons. One was the lack of applicants for the job positions, and second is that there are not enough students graduating for the job positions. But when I go back to my department and see the internship opportunities among my batchmates and people who have graduated only 5 to 10% of people are able to find an internship here in the US, not primarily in Houston. So how do you bridge this gap between the people who are finding the internship opportunity and the actual internship opportunities which are there? Because you said that opportunities are there, and there are students also who are trying to find other opportunities, but there's a gap between them.
Yes, there is a gap. You're absolutely right. What businesses tell us that are interested in working with us on internship opportunities is that many of the students lack some of the basic skills that they're looking for, even to qualify for a basic internship opportunity. So what it means is that we're going to be working more closely with the employers prior to the students indicating that they want an internship opportunity, to determine and to make sure that the skill set that they're looking for taking on the internship opportunities exists, and that the students themselves have gleaned that basic information. So it's really been more of a lack of communication between the employer side, the demand side, with the students themselves who want to take on these internship opportunities. And what we intend on doing is bridging that gap.
Thank you.
And I would add one point to that, just from my own experience working in the steel industry for many years. When I first joined that industry, the steel employers around the country had very extensive apprenticeship programs of their own. And so these medium-skilled jobs that Elaine was talking about in her presentation were things that employers very often in the 1970s, even into the 1980s, they were prepared to train their entry-level employees in those positions. It was sort of the cost of doing business and the way the workforce development system worked in a lot of the country then. But that changed, and most of those apprenticeship programs are gone now. A lot of that obligation to do that training was passed on to community colleges and to the workforce development system. But I agree with Elaine that the communication system broke down, so that we end up a lot of times with community college systems that are shooting in the dark. They're trying to train people for jobs that may have existed once, that they hope exist, but there's not good data that these are the jobs people need. So all over the country, you're starting to see industries create partnerships such as Elaine described. For instance, in Cleveland, there's something called Steelworker of the Future. And the steel companies that operate there are very concerned because, A, manufacturing doesn't have a great reputation with the next generation of young people as a stable employer. There's a big retirement bubble coming, and they don't have a workforce training system of their own to rely on. So they are out now interacting very aggressively with community colleges and high schools and trying to interest people in becoming the, quote, steelworker of the future. And I think we're seeing a lot of that go on. The big opportunity, of course, that I've been trying to focus on, and I think others are here in Houston, up in Pittsburgh, are the opportunities in energy in particular.
So just as a follow-up, are there opportunities for a public-private partnership to sort of build more apprentice programs? Because that seems to be the big difference between, say, 40 years and today, the lack of apprentice and intern programs. Some of that is obviously at the university level, but also some of the community college and kids with college.
Well, the U.S. Department of Labor has a very active program and goal of trying to double the number of apprenticeships in the United States over the next 5 years to something like 1.5 million. And their focus is on 7 particular sectors. Energy happens to be one of them because they see this as as a big growth opportunity as well. And they also are issuing a significant set of apprenticeship grants that certainly University of Houston or other educational institutions could go and look at, and that's precisely what the ShaleNet program that I was describing with this innovative 3D simulator for natural gas extraction is all based around. So apprenticeships are something that everybody's having a very active dialogue about, and very good for employers in particular to weigh in on that, as well as educational institutions.
Hi, my name is Omar Akhtar. I'm a senior studying economics. My question is regarding immigration, which is a really hot topic right now. So you have all these immigrants coming in and demanding more energy, but they're also supplying more labor. So where's immigration playing in this workforce? And do you think it's helping the issue, or is it causing a bigger divide? So I would ask Ms. Barber on that.
Immigration is really a critically important issue. When we pulled together the 79 community representatives that I mentioned, one of the key issues that we addressed was, in fact, immigration. It was at that time when we initially put that group together, there was some forward immigration policy on the boards that looked like it might get some traction. This goes back about a year ago. And we were very optimistic that there would be some not go forward. But there continues to be, especially as it relates to partnerships advocating with our congressional delegation, conversations around more reformed immigration policy that will attempt to address these issues because it's critically important that there is a balanced immigration policy. We support that. Our organization supports that very much so, and we're hoping that in the next session that there will be some reform that goes into the immigration policy arena.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I'm a student at UH. I kind of have a question trying to pick back off of his. What are the basic skills, because you guys talk about the gap, and we all see the gap, and I know for anyone who's applied to any job, you apply to a job and you feel like you have what it takes or you have the basic requirements, then you don't get a call back or you get an interview, and it doesn't really pan out the way you think it is. So, I mean, the way you think it should be. So what are the basic skills, like practical, that we as students can, I guess, build on while in school or in line to get a job? And also, I know from my friends that are young professionals, everyone talks about wanting to advance in their company or within their field. Like, what can we also do to, I mean, not just get that one job, but also stay, I guess, as a good employee or a good candidate for advancement within the companies?
Oh, okay, that's a big question. So I'll start. I would say, because I do a lot of our recruiting at the University of Texas. So, in my mind, it goes going back to my presentation. It's around analytical skill. So the thing I impress upon students that I talk with is all about the more you can understand problem solving, the more you can get in your classes that teach you to deal with real business cases and to understand how to break a problem down, understand what the root cause is, and then come up with some hypotheses around solving that problem. That is the core skill that will serve you just about any field. That is pretty hard to teach. And I've been working with the dean at the undergraduate school, AUT, for about 6 years to help kind of build this program. But I think that is number one in my book. And then to go to the rest of your question, it comes down to communication skills that you build and networking with people, and how you understand how to deal with the teamwork nature of all work these days. I think that's kind of how you get recognized and build your reputation with the company, and then that's how you get pulled along in the next thing. So those would be my two main things.
Yes, I would agree, and I would add a couple of things. Do your homework when it comes to researching a company that you're about to go and interview with. There's enough information out there now that you can really develop a level of information pertaining to that company before you go out on the interview. If you know someone that works for that company, if you come through the college, there may be some connections, and you can sort of get some good information, intelligentsia, so to speak, prior to your going there. The other area that I would add that companies indicate to us the greatest needs are the ability for individuals to be able to effectively work in teams, within a team-like environment. So I would, for those of us, I have children that went to, all attended, graduated from college, and they were very big into peer group interaction, study groups, and that sort of thing. And believe it or not, that's a wonderful way of being able to establish the ability to understand the importance of working in a team environment. Being able to meet the needs or meet the demands as placed through that core. And then, as was mentioned, communications is clearly an area. What employers tell us that is important to them is you do very well in the interview and possibly even get the job, but to keep the job, those things that we've talked about are those clear areas that you need to be able to sustain for long-term sustainability and for the ability to advance.
I'll add my 2 cents on this just from some practical experience. Before I went to work for the Department of Energy, was involved with a policy organization that worked on energy and workforce-related issues. And for a number of years, we ran a job training program that was designed particularly for people in manufacturing who wanted to work in manufacturing setting. And we taught a set of, quote, green skills. So we taught people how to look at their work process, reduce energy consumption, reduce water consumption, increase the amount of recycling that went on, get exposure to toxic materials out of the workplace. And it was essentially what both the other folks were talking about, teaching team-based problem-solving skills. And it was a very effective program when it was linked with hard skill teaching with a community college. So we set up a consortium with 6 or 7 employers, the community college and ourselves, and we taught, for instance, sheet metal fabricating or welding, plus these team-building, problem-solving skills around environmental performance. And over 95% of the graduates of those programs got job offers as soon as they were done. So the really important lesson from that was to get involved in training that's based in employer actual demand for jobs, and then add these kinds of team-building, problem-solving skills to it, and it's definitely a leg up.
We have time for one more question, Elaine.
I don't have a question. I would like to add a little bit to David. That University of Houston actually does a great job creating professional organization student chapters, because this is great information, great advice. What do we do today? How can you get started today? So I would suggest that professional societies are very interested in involving students in their all kinds of activities. So I represent the Petroleum Technology Program, and I know that the Society of Petroleum Engineers is asking how they can introduce the events to the UH students. So we, as a Petroleum Technology team, we actually collaborate with 12 professional societies, student chapters here, and they run very interesting, very good professional events. They invite people from companies, so you can start networking right there at this event. So I would suggest that you pay attention to announcements, to flyers around, inviting you to come to these events, usually provided free food and a very good keynote speaker lecture. So particularly, we invite people at this very moment to the Camp Drill Quick. It is in-company training, 3 days. It is oil and gas engineering company, one of the best, largest in the world. So we invite students, please register and come. So we also, on October 29th, will be Petroleum Industry Expert Lecture Series event. It's a dinner event. We invite all students interested in petroleum technology or oil and gas industry to participate in this event. It will be in Hilton. Please put in your calendar. So anyway, my point is that the University of Houston does a lot of interesting things. Please get curious and get involved with professional organizations as well. And of course, develop your skills as advised by our speakers. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Elaine. Actually, UH Energy has a website. I strongly suggest you take a look at that. You've got a calendar of events for more such events that our students send. So let's conclude this by thanking our speakers, first of all. Terrific. And I want to thank a couple other people too. One is Chevron, who's sponsoring this entire symposium series, and they've been very I want to thank Taylor Nussbaum, Communication Manager at UH Energy, for getting the word out on this symposium. Amani here, who's a student worker who just started today. Now to talk about learning on the job, and she's done such a great job. obviously heard from Stephanie Coates. She is a fantastic person who's coordinating all of this. So thank you so much, Stephanie. Before we conclude, we've got a little bit of a small gift for each of the speakers, which I'll hand out to you. Thank you. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch with you about future events through our both email as well as through our website. Thank you.
Let me press this.